1865 to 1914.
Renaissance.
Renaissance.
No, man, that's the
American Renaissance is when?
That's after
1825.
1825 to 1865.
The end
Yes.
of the Civil War.
End of the Civil War, yes, begins what? Remember?
Romanticism? British Romanticism.
Realism, right, because after the Civil War, there's no more allegory. Everything is too real for allegory, right? So realism, along with its sub-movement of what?
Naturalism.
Naturalism. And that's the one you really need to remember. What is the distinguishing characteristic of naturalism?
Well, naturalism is real people, real situation.
But
Darwin's theory, the stronger will survive.
right, which translated for literary purposes is the influence of external environmental and social factors on an individual, right? So that's why we get the more like crazy stories. Realism is sort of like the pretty people. Naturalism is like it sort of influenced reform action, you know. So it's more about the poor and the criminal element, et cetera, et cetera. You do need to know that. Don't forget that it's late 19th, early 20th century is naturalism. Okay, 1914 is a crucial date for what reason?
That's realism.
Great Depression.
That, my friends, is WW1, right? 1914 to 1918.
World War I.
And then we're going to have a lot of important things that happen in here. Yeah, World War I in 1914 to 1918. The United States doesn't get involved until 1916, after the sinking of the Lusitania, right? And, you know, foreign policy for the U.S. up until this point has been one of isolationism. You know, the idea was, you know, we're expanding westwards, we're doing our thing, manifest destiny. You know, Europe and you've all had your deal for 1,000 years. You know, we don't bother you, you don't bother us. But at the moment of the sinking of the Lusitania, it was a civilian ship. There were American passengers on board. And the idea was, hey, an injustice has been done, and we as Americans now have no choice but to get involved. Does this sound familiar?
Yeah.
Yep.
And what is that? Sarnell, I hear your yeah. What's that about?
The lack of the war in Iraq.
For the reason that the United States gets involved in WW1. Then serious stuff happening. 1920 is Prohibition. Prohibition, that is the 18th Amendment, I think. Yes, yes. Anybody know what that does?
Stops alcohol.
Stops alcohol.
Makes alcohol illegal in the United States.
Weird.
1929, the stock market crash.
And the start of the Harlem Renaissance.
Well, let me, don't get ahead of me, Marco. Stock market crash and the 21st Amendment repeals prohibition because 1929 actually is the start of, for sure, the Great Depression, which is going to continue through the 30s and 40s. All right? And I'm sorry, this is like the first 50 years of the 20th century in 15 minutes. So the 21st Amendment repeals prohibition. Great Depression. the largest financial crisis in the history of the United States.
Today still?
Then, although our present situation rivals that of the Great Depression, still does not reach the parameters of what the Great Depression was. And there were several other factors that contributed to, worsening the Great Depression. The Dust Bowl in the Midwest ruined agricultural lands and was a natural disaster as well. And just lots of different factors contributed to how much worse the Great Depression was. But what brought us out of the Great Depression?
World War II.
Our involvement in World War II. And World War II starts 1936. Again, the United States doesn't get involved until
1960. 43.
42.
or 42.
Oh, World War II, sorry.
What about December 7th, 1941? A day that will live in infamy. Pearl Harbor.
Yeah.
And that definitely brings the United States into World War II.
Operation Overlord, and was on 43, was it, or 42?
You got me on that one, but
The
definitely
invasion of
41
Libya.
were involved. One of the largest losses of not only personnel, most importantly personnel, but battleships and just millions of dollars in people, troops gone, and it's heartbreaking. And it was at that point again that the United States rallies under now a large injustice has been done to us, and now we're involved. So World War II, 1936, U.S. involvement, 1941. Okay, now let's talk about literary movements that mark around these dates. Okay, what's going to start at the 20th century is Modernism. Okay? And it's not, don't think of modernism as, oh, what's new and what's modern. That's not what modernism is. Modernism has specific characteristics when you speak about it with an artistic movement. And there's modernism in visual arts, there's modernism, in music, and definitely modernism in the literary arts. So, let me give you the characteristics there. And it is impossible to separate all of the factors that influence modernism from each other. They all overlap, and like the products of these causes seem to overlap as well. And I feel like I do a serious injustice when I talk about these things because they're so landmark in history, and I just sort of throw it out there as a list. First of all, industrialization. Henry Ford did not invent the combustion engine, okay? What Henry Ford did perfect was assembly line manufacture, which allowed for, factories in the late 19th and definitely aggregating in the early 20th century. So, industrialization, and not only with, the automobile, but we're talking about big steel, meat packing, the big trusts that would create, the magnates of the early 20th century, of the Gilded Age of industrialization. Along with this industrialization is urbanization. We see emergent what we now recognize as, our modern day metropolises, right? especially in the Northeast.